Have you ever felt like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, but you keep it all inside? You don't complain, you don't vent. Instead, you bear the burden alone in silence. We've all been there in those moments of quiet suffering where we feel utterly alone, and the pain, whether physical or emotional, seems relentless. But what if I told you that there's a philosophy, an ancient wisdom, that sees this kind of suffering as a pathway? Not to despair, but to strength? Today we're going to talk about how Stoicism can teach us to suffer in silence, and more importantly, how it can help us transform that suffering into resilience. Suffering is a part of life. That's not just Stoicism talking, that's life itself. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or how much you have. Pain, hardship, adversity, they don't discriminate. The Stoics, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, understood this deeply. For them, suffering wasn't something to run from. It was something to confront head-on with courage. It's not about pretending life isn't hard. It's about recognizing that hardship is an inevitable part of the human experience. Maybe you're going through something right now. Maybe it's heartbreak, financial stress, health problems, or maybe it's something so deeply personal that you don't even have the words for it. And maybe you feel like you're enduring it all alone. But you're not alone. The Stoics believed that it is in these moments, when the world seems harsh, when the pain feels unbearable, that we are presented with the opportunity to show what we're truly made of. Suffering can be a crucible, a test that tempers us. Let me share this with you. One of the core teachings of Stoicism is this: focus on what you can control and let go of what you cannot. Think about that for a moment. You can't control the hardship itself, but you can control how you respond to it. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, an emperor, lived by this rule. Even with all his power, he faced personal suffering, wars, betrayal, and even the loss of children. He endured, not because he was heartless, but because he recognized that complaining or asking "why me" doesn't change the reality of suffering. What changes is you. Think about your own life. How much of your suffering is worsened by dwelling on it, by wishing it away or asking, "Why is this happening to me?" The truth is, the world doesn't always give us answers. But Stoicism gives us a way to navigate these moments. It teaches us that our response, the fortitude to face life's trials without breaking, is what defines us. Now, let's talk about silence. Silence in suffering isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending that everything's fine. It's about cultivating an inner stillness. It's about finding strength in the quiet moments when you sit alone with your pain and realize that you are stronger than the burden you carry. When you suffer in silence, it's not an act of weakness, it's an act of profound self-discipline. And here's where Stoicism really shines. The Stoics saw silence in hardship as a virtue, as a sign of inner mastery. They believed that by enduring without complaint, we grow tougher, more resilient. Picture this in your mind: the great philosopher Epictetus. Born a slave, crippled, he had every reason to rail against the unfairness of life. Yet his words to us are simple. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. That's the heart of it. By practicing silence in suffering, by not reacting impulsively, we gain control over our inner selves. We start to realize that suffering is temporary, but the character we build from enduring it can last forever. So how do we do this? How can we truly apply Stoic principles to our lives in a way that helps us suffer in silence with dignity, rather than drowning in despair? It's one thing to understand Stoicism on an intellectual level, but the real challenge comes in living it, especially when life throws its hardest punches. It starts with a shift in perspective. You see, most of us have been conditioned to believe that suffering is something to escape, to avoid at all costs. We reach for distractions, social media, endless entertainment, even substances, anything to numb the pain. But the Stoics took a different approach. They didn't run from suffering. They embraced it as an inevitable part of life and found strength in facing it head-on. Start with reflection. Every day, especially in the morning or before you sleep, take a moment to reflect on the hardships you've faced. Not with frustration, but with acceptance. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can this shape me for the better? This is a practice the Stoics themselves used. Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, reflected constantly on the nature of life's difficulties. Another Stoic practice that can help you is what's known as negative visualization. It may sound counterintuitive at first, but it's a powerful way to prepare yourself for life's hardships. Here's how it works. Rather than trying to avoid thinking about potential difficulties, you imagine them vividly. Picture the worst-case scenario unfolding, whether it's losing a job, dealing with a betrayal, or even facing illness. Now, before you panic, understand the purpose of this exercise. It's not to fill your mind with fear or negativity. It's to train yourself to emotionally prepare for the things that life could throw at you. By mentally confronting the worst before it happens, you take away its power to shock you. You're no longer caught off guard. You've already faced it in your mind, and in doing so, you've built a mental resilience. You're telling yourself, even if this happens, I am strong enough to handle it. When that hardship does arrive, and it will at some point, there's a certain calm that comes over you. You've already prepared. And now, instead of reacting with panic or despair, you can face the challenge with quiet strength. That's the essence of suffering in silence, not out of repression, but out of mastery. Hold that thought for a bit and reflect on what we have talked about. Now, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, or share your thoughts on your challenges in dealing with internal pain and suffering. Let's continue. Another key aspect of applying Stoicism is understanding the difference between what is temporary and what is permanent. Suffering is always temporary. It may feel endless in the moment, but no pain lasts forever. However, the character you build from enduring that suffering, that's permanent. Stoicism encourages us to shift our focus from the fleeting discomfort of the present moment to the long-term strength we are cultivating. Think about it like this. Suffering is like running a marathon. There are moments where your legs burn, your lungs scream for air, and your mind begs you to stop. But each step you take, each moment you push through, you're getting closer to the finish line. And when you cross it, the pain doesn't matter anymore. It's the triumph, the growth, the sense of achievement that stays with you. That's how Stoics approach suffering. It's not something to be feared or avoided. It's something to endure with grace, knowing that the temporary pain will give way to a permanent inner strength. You'll look back and realize that the suffering didn't break you, it built you. But I know it's easier said than done. When you're in the middle of it, when the pain is fresh, it's hard to see the bigger picture. That's why Stoicism also teaches us the value of perspective. Take a step back. Look at your situation from a wider angle. Imagine you're a friend looking at your life. What advice would you give them? What would you tell them about enduring this difficult time? Perspective allows you to see your suffering not as a punishment, but as a challenge. And here's the thing. Every challenge can be overcome with time and patience. The more you practice this shift in perspective, the more natural it becomes to view your hardships as opportunities to grow rather than moments to break down. Lastly, learn to embrace silence itself. In a world that's constantly loud, filled with distractions and noise, silence is rare. But in that silence there's power. When we sit with our suffering in quiet reflection, when we don't immediately react or seek out comfort from others, we allow ourselves to process the pain on a deeper level. It's in that stillness that we realize we're not as fragile as we think. We're stronger than we know. By suffering in silence, by choosing not to seek external validation or pity, we're building an inner fortress, a place where hardship can come knocking, but it won't break through. You'll stand firm. At the end of the day, suffering is something none of us can escape. But through Stoicism, we can learn to endure it with dignity. We can learn to turn that silence into strength. We can transform what could break us into something that builds us. The next time you face suffering, I challenge you to try this. Sit with it in silence. Don't run from it. Don't let it overwhelm you. Embrace the stillness and see how that quiet strength transforms you. You are stronger than you think. The Stoic path is here to guide you through suffering and beyond. If you liked this video, then you will definitely like this video wherein we talk about how Marcus Aurelius unlocked the philosophy of Stoicism.